Hello, hello, hello. Hi, everybody. Welcome, welcome. So glad that you guys could join us. I've been so excited about this live. Ever since Crime Curious was on Criminalities panel and she spoke about this psychiatrist and she spoke about this um, documentary. As soon as the live ended, I watched that documentary. In fact, I've watched it twice now. And I'm very, very excited and pleased to have Crime Curious here with us tonight to talk about this psychiatrist. And before we begin, hold on a second. What am I doing? Here we go. I want to give you guys the link to Crime Curious is going to be doing a like recap of the week on Thursdays because they don't have court on Thursdays, which is weird. I think they should have court on Thursday and not have it on Friday, but they didn't ask me. So this is the link to that live, and she's going to have some really amazing guests on tomorrow. So I'm putting that in there. And then if one of the mods could help me out by like copying and pasting that and posting it every so often, I would appreciate it. And then this is the Kickstarter link because Crime Curious is writing a book about Letecia and the Gannon Stauch case. And we want to help her out. So put this in here. I cannot type and talk at the same time. Thank you. Welcome, Indigo DW. Welcome to the whole club. Thank you. Thank you very much for joining memberships. Glad to have you. All right, let's see. There's that. Okay. So there's that. All right. Now, before we get started, as you know, we need to have a word from our sponsor. So here it goes.
And Kai, when you're on Jen Lou's channel, what do you do with the like button?
Smash, smash, smash! Yeah.
All right. So without further ado, I bring you Crime Curious. Welcome, welcome, welcome.
Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having me, Jen Liu. I've been looking forward to this as well.
Oh, yay. I'm so glad. And it's so funny because you're a Jen too. Well, Jennifer, but most Jennifers go by Jen. So
I do.
I do too. I only go by Jennifer when I'm in trouble. Yes.
Oh, I did want to tell you, I want to be real careful, or I want to be really clear that I am not writing a book about Letecia Stauch, as much as I'm sure she would love that.
You're right. I should have worded that better.
No, it's okay. I just want to make sure it's clear that the book is about due process in the case against Letecia Stauch, but a major point of the book is also open source intelligence in the court of public opinion. You know, the stuff that we do.
Yes.
And public opinion. So
that is, I can't wait. And when I get my next YouTube paycheck, I will definitely be donating to the Kickstarter fund because I am fascinated by that subject. Number one, I'm very always interested in how the court of public opinion plays out in the actual trials and how not law enforcement so much, but how the attorneys, both for the state and for the prosecution or defense, sort of tailor their arguments and stuff based on feedback. And I'm just curious about it all. I'm very, very fascinated by trials. That's
right.
my favorite thing.
And I wanted to do a Kickstarter rather than a GoFundMe where, in a GoFundMe, you're just basically asking for donations. And in a Kickstarter, you're actually purchasing a pre-order signed copy of the book. So
absolutely. And that's a big difference. That's a huge, and I can't wait to see, I cannot wait to see the results. I know it's going to be amazing. So let's talk about Dr. Lewis. So for those of you guys who are not familiar, and it is something that Crime Curious shared on Criminalities panel about who this new psychiatrist for Letecia was going to be. And again, there is a documentary on HBO Max called crazy, not insane, which is a nod really about there is a difference between clinically insane and the legal definition of insane. They are not the same thing. And so that is sort of what the premise of that documentary is about, but it focuses on a one single psychiatrist and how she came to be a psychiatrist and what caused her to study what she studied, because she studies something very specific. One of the things that she studies is if there is a connection between people who murder and trauma and brain damage. So essentially, what she did was have a study, and she interviewed people in prison. She also interviewed juveniles too. Um, and she looks primarily, she interviews the patient or prisoners also. She interviews the families, etc. She gets a history of these people, not just from the prisoner slash patient themselves. Okay. And then she employed which I don't, employed is probably not the right word. She brought on a neurologist. And the neurologist is the one that looks at the physical makeup of these individuals' brains. And they were trying to draw a conclusion. And in the course of that initial study, she was called in to work on the case of a woman who, along with her 14-year-old, it's not a boyfriend situation because she's an adult. It was her daughter's boyfriend that she became involved with romantically. They, I guess kidnapped is not quite the right word, but there was another 14-year-old, wasn't she, Crime Curious, that was at the apartment too. And they ended up keeping her there, holding her hostage. It was a hostage situation and horrible things were done. And in the end, the 14-year-old boy unalived this girl. Okay. But he's the one that turned on her first. So Dr. Lewis was brought in to evaluate her. And it was during these sessions that she determined for the first time that dissociative identity disorder does exist, and that in her, all along in her schooling, because it's not a diagnosis that's widely accepted among psychiatrists. So all along in her schooling, she'd been wrong that DID does exist. And I have to say, when I watched this documentary, I watched very, very carefully, and one of the cases that she was called into took place in New York, and now I cannot remember this serial killer's name. It starts with an S. I keep wanting to say Starkweather, but I know that's not right because obviously that's in Kansas.
I think you're thinking of Arthur Shawcross.
Shawcross, that's it. That's the case. And she was brought in on that one, and they're essentially trying to keep him off of death row. And she sometimes is brought in for mitigation in the penalty phase, but she's also testified during the actual trial. Okay. And she faced a lot of scrutiny. There was another psychiatrist testifying for the state who said that essentially because she had Shawcross under hypnosis, she is the one who suggested an alter personality, or several, one of them being his mother. And it was, as Dr. Lewis describes it, a very, very humiliating experience for her. So
Right.
when I watched this, I thought to myself, based on that, there is no way that she's going to evaluate Letecia Stauch and say that A, she was insane at the time of the crime by the legal definition, and B, that she has any form of DID. Well, yesterday, during the jury selection, there was the state and the defense were given like a 2-minute sort of sample opening statement. And the first thing out of the defense's mouth is to refer to Dr. Lewis. And they said something to the effect of, she will testify that Letecia Stauch was insane at the time of the crime, and more to the point, she has DID. Did I get that about right?
Absolutely. He did confirm all of that.
And I was floored. Now, I want to say this. The judge, but prior to the defense and the state making their sample opening statements or whatever, the judge did say that they may not hear this in the trial if they're selected. Okay. But I think, I cannot imagine any circumstances under which they would say something like that as the defense and then not use part of that in their defense. And I will say this. Yesterday, what I heard was a lot of jurors, kind of regardless of what the judge was actually asking them, they were very, very stuck on this not guilty by reason of insanity. They did not buy it. They didn't want to hear about it. And this is going to be a very, very difficult case for them to seat a jury. What do you think?
Oh, I agree. I mean, specifically, there were people who used the word cop out yesterday in regard to the NGRI defense. And it is confusing, if you think about it. They started the day out Monday by talking about how motive does not matter. It does not matter why she killed Gannon. It only matters that she did, in fact, kill him. So the prosecution, the burden of proof is entirely on the prosecution. The prosecution is going to have to prove their case in 2 parts. Part 1 being that she did, in fact, kill Gannon Stauch, and part 2 being that she was sane when she did it and after, for all of the lesser charges.
Right.
And the thing to me that's confusing about that is, okay, if the why doesn't matter, I mean, listen to the phrase "not guilty by reason of insanity." It's by reason of. I mean, isn't that explaining the why? So you're telling me that she's, according to the defense, she should be found not guilty because she was insane when she did it,
Right.
which is the why, right? But then they say that doesn't matter. So I'm on board with most of the jurors that we've heard from. WTF? I don't get it.
I don't get it either. This is the other thing that I don't understand. So, when like Jeffrey Dahmer went on trial, and I know that these are 2 different states. One is Wisconsin, obviously, and one is Colorado. But they were having a trial to determine whether he was sane or not. And the burden was on the defense then. How come it's not on the defense in this situation?
Because it's Colorado.
Okay.
I had a local defense attorney come on Monday night. Now, I was only going to do a live stream every Thursday, but after that first day of jury selection, I had to do an impromptu live and bring on an attorney because I needed somebody a lot smarter than me, as it relates to the law, to answer these questions for me. Because even studying this case for 3 years, it's a complex case. And so luckily I have those resources. So I brought him on, and his background, he spent a lot of years working in the state of Iowa. And in Iowa, like in Wisconsin, the burden of proof is on the defense. But in Colorado, the burden of proof is 100% on the prosecution.
That baffled me. I have to email you and get you to third party pick his brain, because I don't understand this battered women's or battered wife defense that Boone is attempting, her attorney is going to use, because that seems like also a confirmatory plea. You're acknowledging that you did it, but it's justifiable because, you know what I mean? Sort of like not guilty by reason of insanity, that you're acknowledging that you committed the crime. It's about whether or not you were insane or sane at the time. And I also thought that, and I know it's different in different states, but by and large, most states don't allow the not guilty by reason of insanity if you or if the person did even one thing, no matter how smart, dumb, or successful it was or unsuccessful, one thing to cover up their crime that negates the not guilty by reason of insanity. Obviously, that does not work that's not a thing in Colorado.
Right. Well, one of my hopes is that after this case, there's enough coverage about the due process of it all that we have, I myself am a registered voter in El Paso County. Laws can change, and these things can change. So, maybe we have a small hand in bringing awareness to the opinion, which seems to be a very popular one, that NGRI is BS.
Right. And it's such a shot in the dark. And I will say this, one of the things that I was very, very impressed with this judge, when the jurors had so many issues with the not guilty by reason of insanity, was he said, listen, we're really putting the cart in front of the horse here, but if you get chosen to be on this jury, you are going to be instructed that you can believe all, part, or none of a person's testimony.
Right. Specifically the doctors.
Correct. And oh, thank you, Emily, very much. Emily gifted 5 memberships. So congratulations to whoever got them. And thank you very much, Emily. I appreciate that. I'm very, very curious to hear from this doctor, because I'm not a psychiatrist. I don't play one on TV. And the only school that I've attended is the School of Life and Hard Knocks. And I graduated with honors in that arena. Thank you very much. I've been through some stuff, but but I am cognizant of people and people's behaviors. I mean, I'm not, oblivious, but what I don't understand is, every human being on the planet dissociates at some point or another. And I will say she used a very good analogy in the documentary. She talked about driving home and missing your exit because you're deep in thought. That is dissociation. And dissociation is sort of like there is a spectrum of dissociation. The top of the top of the spectrum, the high end of the spectrum would be dissociative identity disorder. Okay. And that is where the mind splits into different personalities, and they all have a unique name. In the history of anything that I've ever read about DID or watched about DID, and I remember in high school taking psychology, and we watched the movie Sybil.
Yep.
I remember also, I've watched it after that too, and I've also watched Primal Fear. And the one thing in all the things that I've ever read about DID, I've never seen a case where the alters have have the same last name as I don't even know what you call the primary personality. There's a term for that. Now I can't think of what it's called.
The waking self.
The waking self. There you go. And there was a show a couple years back, I think, on A&E. And it was about a woman who had dissociative identity disorder. And bless her heart, she was a single mom of 2 boys. And there were journals that were kept. And none of her alters some of them didn't even have last names, let alone the same last name continually throughout all of the different alters. This is how I cannot understand this doctor. I'm floored by it, because the case now what is his name again? Why can I not remember people's names today?
Arthur Shawcross.
Shawcross. That case was publicly humiliating for her. I
Absolutely.
mean, she admits it. There was a song written about her And it
Mhm.
was not a good one, you guys. You really got to check out this documentary. And if you don't have HBO Max, you guys, I'm sure it can be found other ways, but if you just want to do it easy peasy lemon squeezy, just sign up for a free trial. Just remember to cancel. But
Yep. It's also on YouTube where you can rent it or buy it.
oh,
I
there you
think
go.
yeah.
There you go. That might even be cheaper. So, but you have to see it, because what I don't understand is why she would put her reputation
Mhm.
on the line for this case.
Right. And let's not forget that she's in her 80s now.
Right. And I have to say, I had high hopes for Dr. Lewis. And one of the reasons I had high hopes for Dr. Lewis is because what she basically was saying in this documentary, the overall feel of it was people who do heinous things, commit heinous crimes, ought to be punished. Her main bone of contention was executing people who suffered from some mental health disorder. That was her main bone of contention. One of the prisoners that she evaluated had a habit, who was sent to death row. He had a habit of saving his dessert. And on the day of his execution, his last meal, he saved his dessert. He saved his pecan pie. And she thought that perfectly illustrated that he is not aware of what it means to be executed and therefore shouldn't be. She's not advocating for them not to be punished, but this is why I don't understand why she would use this case to hang her hat. I'm baffled by it, frankly.
Right. This is not a death penalty case. Letecia Stauch is not facing capital punishment. The only question is whether she will be sent to a mental institution under a civil commitment or prison under a criminal one. The problem with the mental institution is that if she is sent there as soon as she is, let's call it mended, she can apply once a year, every year for release. And if she does ever get released, and we all know that Letecia just does not quit, so she would apply every year to be released. And if she ever is released, she's acquitted. So she's free.
Right.
And
And
that's why she wants to go to the mental institution.
and quite frankly, I don't listen. And I want the reason, one of the other reasons I wanted to talk about this and the legal ramifications, and I'm hoping Dr. B will join me, my bestie, Dr. B, who hosts True Psych Ward, is a psychologist. She has her doctorate and is very well versed in number one, the prison system, but also evaluating people for trial. So she knows this whole system, and and the ins and outs of it and how it goes and the criteria. And I really, really, really hope that she makes it to come up here, because I want you, it's complicated for people who don't deal with it on a day-to-day to understand. Like, there is a difference between competency. So competency just means that you understand your charges. You know what you're charged with. You know what a courtroom is and the judge. Okay. You can behave in the courtroom and you can assist in your own defense. So when Lori Vallow was declared incompetent, that doesn't mean that she is insane by the legal definition or the clinical definition. It just means, I personally believe that Lori was doing whatever it was that she was doing in an effort to circumvent the circumstances. And likely the part that she was found not to be competent in would be the ability to assist in her own defense, or maybe to understand what the charges were. But definitely, Lori is another one. She's slicker than baby snot. And I believe that Letecia is as well. I believe she is malingering. I believe that she is not sorry for anything that she has done. I think she thinks that she is completely and wholly justified in what she did. And I think that should she be loose on the streets, that she would be a continual danger to society. Period.
I agree with everything you just said.
And I know that the potential jurors that were very, very adamant about not believing or putting any credence into the not guilty by reason of insanity defense, they're likely going to be the ones scratched very early on, dismissed, removed, however you want to say it. But
Right. Well, and this part of jury selection, one of, I think Will Cook, which is one of Leticia's attorneys, I think he said it this morning. Let me look at my notes. Yeah, this part of jury selection is not really jury selection at all. This stage is actually jury deselection. It's all about excluding potential jurors day by day until they get down to that number of 110. And then, then they'll eventually get down to 12 jurors and 6 alternates, or 6. Yeah.
oh wow, well, Colorado likes to have extra for sure, for sure. Good.
Oh yeah. Yeah. So they're bringing in 75 every day. On day 1, they kept 20. On
Okay.
day 2, they kept 18. And today, I believe they kept 18, but I had some appointments, so I was in and out. And basically, anyone that they keep now during this first round will be asked to come back on April 3rd and find out if they will be selected or
Okay.
chosen to be on that jury of 12 or one of the 6 alternates.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
They
So
do it a little different, but they are really just, you're right. This is mainly the deselection process,
right.
elimination. This is the
Right.
elimination round. I will say this. I think when they do finally select the jury, when they have the 12 and then the 6 alternates, I don't think that they're going to listen to Dr. Lewis's testimony. Of course they're going to listen to it, but I don't think they're going to put any credence in it. I really don't.
Right. Well, and from what I understand, the autopsy photos and some of the details are beyond what we can even imagine. And I think that the jury will be incredibly affected by those.
Well, one of the things that I didn't say yet, but I'm glad you brought that up. Thank you, because it jogged my memory. So when the state gave their preview opening, is what I should call it, statement, they talked about what happened to Gannon.
Yep.
And talking about it and hearing it are one thing, but seeing autopsy pictures, I can only say that there's only ever been one case where I have seen the autopsy pictures as it relates to children, and that is the West Memphis 3 case. And the first time I ever saw those photographs was probably 2005 or 6, maybe somewhere in that vicinity. It is 2023. I have never forgotten. And I will never forget. Those are images that are seared into your brain. Welcome, Ruby Joy. Sorry, I have my phone turned just a little askew and I couldn't read. Thank you, Ruby Joy. Welcome. Thank you for coming to the 51100 Club. Welcome, welcome. We're glad to have you. Welcome to the ward. Those images are seared into your brain. You'll never forget them. Which I also think we should do something for jurors. They should be offered some type of counseling after the fact. When you see stuff like that, it changes you. It's indelible in your brain. And from what I understand, Gannon fought.
It sounds like he did. That is something else that they mentioned today in the afternoon session. the judge did mention to the jurors that the state of Colorado does provide counseling for members of any jury.
Oh, good.
So I was happy to hear that today.
Good, because they're going to need it. I mean,
Yep.
listen, autopsy pictures, let me just say this. They're heinous. They're
Mhm.
they're difficult to look at, okay, period. But when it is a child, it is something completely different. And what I would suggest to anybody and everybody is don't go looking for these
No.
ever. You
No.
don't need to see them. There isn't anything that you can glean from them. I mean, you're not, I looked and I have regrets. I wish that and they've never, it's those autopsy photos with the West Memphis 3 case. Those were carefully guarded. And I had been a member of the boards for a very, very long time. And I have never shared them. I would never share them, but I don't want you guys to think that that was a very strict policy, is that those would never be shared around. And they weren't. There's only a very select people that have seen those autopsy pictures. To my knowledge, I can't say beyond that, but to my knowledge, there's only been a very few people that have seen that outside of like law enforcement and attorneys. So,
Right. And that doesn't just apply to autopsy photos necessarily. I learned a very powerful lesson in seeking out the evidence in the case against Mark Redwine. I don't know if you're familiar with that case, but you cannot
Can you give
unsee
me
those
a little bit of,
photographs.
give us a little overview, because I remember, but not, bless it. It's so much. What's that?
Yeah.
Can you give us a little?
So the victim in that case was named Dylan Redwine, and he was 13 years old back in November of 2012. And he was forced, because of a court-ordered child custody agreement, he was forced to go see his father. But earlier that year, he and his brother had found some photographs of his father doing some really untoward things. And, I hate to get too far into
You
detail.
don't have to. Just the
Maybe
overview.
just enough details.
I remember this case. Now it's all coming back to me. Yes.
Yeah. So, and that case took 9 years to finally come to completion. And in October of 2021, Mark Redwine, which is Dylan's father, was sentenced to 48 years in prison. Now, that doesn't seem like enough. It was a second-degree charge. It doesn't seem like enough. But at the same time, he was in his 60s. So it basically ends up being a life sentence. Right. And I've met Dylan Redwine's family, and I will be writing about that case in the future. The only reason I'm writing about this case and publishing it first is because the timing of it all.
Yes.
Right. But I worked on Redwine for years. So
crime scene photos, autopsy photos, they're all bad. Don't seek them out. You can't really, you think you want to know because you need to put the puzzle pieces together. But I'm telling you guys from personal experience, what you can't unknow.
Right.
And it's just too hard. It's too much. Anyway, so I like I said, I cannot understand what do you think that this doctor could possibly have seen in Letecia to not only give her she was legally insane at the time of the crime, and B, she has dissociative identity disorder, because you had mentioned something about being in one of the hearings one time.
Mm-hmm. Right. And to me, it was just so clearly BS. So that was the hearing that you're talking about was September 15th of 2022. And I was sitting in the front row, and that was the day that she made us wait 45 minutes because she was refusing to come in from the van. And when she finally did come in, she walks in the shackles, and she's hunched over, she's sluggish. She appears to be drugged, although I don't believe that she was. And right when she gets right in front of me, as she's getting ready to sit down at the defense table, she kind of snaps to. Suddenly she's standing up straight. She's looking ahead. She's looking around. And then she sits down and decides to act right for the rest of the hearing. Until the end, of course, which is when we have the outbursts. But in my opinion, what she was doing there was trying to fake a switch. And and if her acting was that good for Dorothy Lewis, come on, you know, and I thought the same. I was hopeful, honestly.
Me too.
Because
when I thought, okay, I understand that. Listen, this Dr. Lewis has given some controversial, and I understand diagnoses and evaluations, and I get it. But she was so adamant about this isn't for her about freeing people or getting them out of punishment, that I thought there's no way Letecia is going to be able to pull the wool over this woman's eyes.
Right. Well, and I have a direct quote. I've got pages and pages of notes on Dr. Lewis.
Oh,
but let me find.
Bust out, lady. We're dying to hear it.
Right.
Mainly me. Even if it was just me and you.
Right. Okay, so here's a direct quote from Dr. Lewis. She says, I have very little experience with women, and I don't know enough about them to say very much. Men seem to be 9 times more violent than women. Oh, okay.
Right. So would this be like, I know she interviewed a young girl who was maybe 11, 12, somewhere in that neighborhood, maybe 13 tops. Then the first time she ever recognized that she had seen a switch.
Right. And I think that was 1984.
Correct. And then now with Letecia, because every other case, now I will say this, I thought what she had to say about Bundy was quite interesting in that she didn't actually come out and diagnose him as having DID. What she did say was that he was on sort of the spectrum of dissociation, and he was at different points in his life and during the crimes in different areas on that spectrum. But
and I've got that direct quote as well, because I found it interesting. So according to my notes, so in 1986, Dorothy Lewis worked with the defense on Ted Bundy's appeal. And and so they brought in a psychologist and a neurologist, and a neuropsychologist did a computerized EEG. And what they found with the EEG was, number one, that he had no gross neurological problems, not obviously meaning large and not disgusting. Anyway, he had no major.
Physically, his brain was intact.
Right.
There
clearly,
wasn't
he had
anything going on.
Problems.
Clearly, he had some wrong ass thinking. Very wrong.
Right. So no major neurological problems were found on the EEG, but they did find some abnormalities that are often found in depressed people. And so other professionals, several of them, in fact, had diagnosed Bundy with psychopathy. They said he was just a psychopath, and Bundy himself blamed it on access to pornography.
I found that last interview that he did to be so self-serving, so disingenuous. And I don't actually think that Bundy believes at all in any way, shape, or form that pornography is what caused him to do what he did. The truth of the matter is he is a lying liar mouth who tells lies. He has lied about his upbringing and the way that his home life was. We know that it was not idyllic the way that he paints it out to be. And I really want to know, if his first murder really was the neighbor girl, the 10-year-old.
Right. I mean, who knows? He and Letecia both have stockpiles of what I call frequent liar miles. And so Dorothy's direct quote on Bundy was that he was somewhere on the continuum of dissociative identity disorder.
Thank you. Continuum. That's what I was trying to remember. Continuum.
Yeah.
Thank God for your notes, babe.
I need them. It's a lot. So with him, she said that she really decided that he had, that he was somewhere on the continuum of dissociative identity disorder because she had analyzed letters that he had written to his wife. And in some of those letters, he had signed them differently. I think that at one point he signed one of the letters with his father's name, and apparently
Yeah,
that's
one
when
of
the
them
wife,
was Sam and
right.
Samuel. That was, well, I think it's his grandfather,
Right.
actually.
Oh, you're right. You're
The
right.
which that's a whole other, that's a different basket of worms, or bucket of worms, or can of worms, or whatever the hell you put the worms in, that we might not want to get into for this show. But bottom line is, yes, it's the grandfather. Yes. Mm-hmm.
Right. And so that's why I find it very interesting because, not only have we seen two separate letters that Letecia has written to the judge, one signed Dr. T. Stauch, the other one signed Letecia Stauch, but we also have letters that she has written to strangers, people with YouTube channels and things of that nature, people she found on Facebook, basically anybody that contacted her in jail during that first year of her incarceration. And she signs some of them Janelle Carmen Stauch. She signs some of them Letecia Taylor Stauch. She signs some of them purposely, just not legible. And to me, it's staged.
I
In
think
my
it's
opinion, it's
malingering.
staged.
Yes, I agree.
Yeah, yeah. She, and I don't think for a second that Letecia Stauch did not study at a minimum Casey Anthony and Ted Bundy at a minimum.
Right.
And back in 2006, and the profile is still up today. There's a link to it on my website. Letecia had a profile on a website called angelfire.com under Tisha Hardin, which is her maiden name, of course.
Okay.
And a direct quote from that is, well, actually, I'm not going to say direct quote because I'm paraphrasing. I don't have it in front of me. But it was that she wanted to, her goals in the future were that she wanted to teach law and help children who, are help children who are in bad family situations. And so she has been studying, she wanted to grow up and teach law. So everything that she does, she's also had some, she's incredibly litigious. She loves to sue people. And sometimes she wins. She won a lawsuit against a former school that she worked for. And it was
Yes.
the sexual harassment lawsuit against the assistant principal. And she was successful in that litigation. So
did she represent herself?
I don't know. I can't remember.
Thank you, Deb, for welcome to the 50-1100 Club. Thank you. Glad to have you. Welcome to the ward. I need a little thing for that at some point. I can't believe look, Letecia is a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
Dumb is not one of them.
Right.
And we can say, okay, she made some poor decisions, even stupid decisions or whatnot. But by and large, she is an intelligent woman. She knows what she's doing. And I found it interesting that throughout all of everything, mainly the probable cause affidavit, Letecia always has an answer for every piece of evidence that was found. There's an explanation.
Absolutely.
Do you know what I mean?
Oh yeah, and she does it. She absolutely does it on purpose. She's very good at staging the evidence from the beginning before anyone even comes along to investigate. That's why she took the video of the infamous candle incident. And she did admit later that was not taken on accident.
See, that's what I thought, Crime Curious. I thought that she admitted to it, but even if she didn't,
she did.
Even if she hadn't, you can listen, we all have had smartphones for a long time now. We are smart cookies. We know how they work. Thank you, Angela. Thank you. We all know how they work. We all know how videos work. When your camera is unintentionally on, you will get the weirdest. It's pointed in a weird direction at the ceiling, or it's blurry, or it's covered up because it looks like it was in your pocket or something. Do you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So that was not what this was. This was very staged. And I want to hear, this is my take on that. Okay. And I'm curious what you think of it. To me, I think that she took that video, and in the beginning, I think that she had intentions to get Gannon help. And that's what that video was about, sort of video evidence of what her story was. And then she's got Gannon on video agreeing to it, despite what, if he may change his story later, she's got this video. Something
Right.
happened after that video was taken, and it may not be something overtly that Gannon actually did, but something she perceived him doing that caused her to change her mind and realize, no, 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 I cannot take him to get help. That's what I think.
Right.
What do
Or
you
give him
think?
an opportunity to tell on her for whatever did happen. I've
Right.
always believed, I've always believed that the most important part of everything was whatever happened Sunday night, because I personally have always believed that everything she did after whatever it was that happened Sunday night was in order to cover, or, you see people who bring in a fixer. She was fixing the situation, to include killing Gannon, in my opinion. Even his murder was to cover up something else that happened, and I believe whatever it was happened Sunday night.
And yes, I will agree with that. And I will also say the only thing that I believe to be true in Leticia's story is that that candle was involved some way, somehow, because it is the
Sure.
one thing that is consistent
Mhm.
in the story. And it's always like, if her narrative of what happened that day was a book, the candle
Mhm.
would be the protagonist. The
Right.
candle would be like the Harry Potter of her books, the main character. Everything revolved around that candle. And
That makes
there's
sense.
something about that candle is important. What it is, for sure, obviously, only Letecia knows. But there
Right.
is something about that candle. Something.
Right. And we may find out and we may not find out. At this point, as it stands right now, we have no idea what evidence is going to be brought into that courtroom. And I love to remind people that all that matters is the evidence that's presented to that jury. Everything that we think we know has to be put aside when that jury is seated, because it's entirely up to them to determine the facts of the case.
Correct. And I will say this, because so many of us, myself included, and this, what's weird about it is I was very invested in the Alec Murdaugh trial. But I had heard about it, followed it a little bit, but didn't actually really start digging into it until the Sunday before jury selection. Okay.
Mhm.
But then it was just, it was all consuming. And I have to say that I was very frustrated by my own, I don't, not behavior, but um, some of the, I got too emotionally invested because I knew too much. And
Yep.
I'm so glad that you said what you said, because you brought me back to the way the court works. Just because it is something we know, okay, doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to bring it into court. They have to bring their best, most succinct case forward. And so there might, just because details may not be shown in court, does not mean those details didn't happen, does not mean that we were wrong about something or it didn't occur or whatever. But this is they decide the evidence and the story that they're going to tell that will get them the conviction. And that's just
Right.
the way it works. And I have to say that really, this is not even a reminder for you guys. It's a reminder for your girl here, because I do know, not probably not nearly as much as Crime Curious or some of you other guys, but I do know enough. And there is something particularly heinous to me about crimes against children, but it's especially heinous when it is a person who is charged with loving and protecting those children. So this is a double whammy, and it's, we have to keep that in mind, that they're not going to present all the things. They're going to present the most important things. But I do think we'll
Right.
get some questions answered, things that we couldn't quite put together.
Oh, definitely. Definitely. But I mean, think about it this way. Could you imagine if, with all of the craziness and complexities of this case, with everything that we've learned, out here in the true crime world over the last 3 years, could you imagine if you're on a jury and you hear all of those details all at once? You would be so confused that,
and overwhelmed. How could you possibly?
Right. So I'm sure that we will hear, a very, prepared, precise, and productive case, presented by the prosecution.
I'm
God, that was a lot of
curious.
peas.
You did great. I'm curious though, what else could they present other than Dr. Lewis?
I'm not sure. They did mention that they, on day one, with the defense's mini opening statement, on day one, Josh Tellini talked about how they were going to hear evidence from people who could come on the stand and testify about the goodness of Letecia Stauch, and that she was a loving mother and a loving stepmother, and that there is plenty of evidence to point to that fact, according to the defense. So
Right.
I do think that we're going to have some character witnesses from the defense. The defense at this point, no public record has been made regarding their endorsed witnesses.
That's interesting to me. And you know what else is interesting to me is, how are they paying for this for the doctor? Because they are private attorneys, but they are now being state paid because of all the the issues and whatnot. And these are the lawyers now, right? So how are they paying for this? Because wasn't their explain that, their argument and everything, why they didn't have to release the name and all that? Because that's interesting to me too.
Right. So, and that's why I was onto this doctor months ago, because they didn't want to, they being the defense, they didn't want to release the name of the doctor during that September 5th hearing. And they hadn't even given the judge the name of the doctor. And so the judge looks at the defense and says, I'm going to need to know the name of your doctor because I need to put in an order for state rate, state pay. And Tellini comes back and says, well, with all due respect, Your Honor, you don't need to know the name of our doctor because the state is not paying for her. And I did find out through my research and through consulting with defense attorneys. So there is a group up in Denver called the Office of Alternate Defense Counsel. And they are paying for Dr. Lewis's expert testimony. Now, it's tricky because it's officially still paid for by the state. It's just not in the control of the court. It's still taxpayer dollars that are paying for Dr. Dorothy Lewis, but it's through the Office of Alternate Defense Counsel in Denver. That's who paid for it.
Wow. Okay. That's interesting, though.
It is.
I mean, at the end of the day, I highly doubt Letecia, even though she might, depending on how this goes, she might try to file an ineffective assistance of counsel appeal, but I do not think she will. First of all, those are very difficult appeals to mount. They're very rarely successful. If you think about in terms of like Brandon Dassey, all right, he has an absolute concrete, ironclad, ineffective assistance of counsel. His counsel gave the state permission to go and interview Brandon without him being present. That's as ineffective as it gets. Okay. That's just one thing. So, not only interview him, but they gave him tests. So anyway, that's just one example. And his ineffective assistance of counsel appeal was not successful at first. I don't know where it is in the system now, but back then it was not successful. But I don't think she's going to have a snowball's chance in hell at that. They sound like they're doing what they need to do. They're advocating for their client. And I can't like knock them for it. Even
Right.
because she has, she's, and that's the other thing that the judge really, really reiterated in this process. He was telling the jurors, which I also thought which was good, because we forget that if he were to seat everybody that was in front of him that day and ask them to deliberate, their true verdict should be not guilty. They haven't heard one thing,
Right.
anything of evidence. And the Letecia from day one, from second one on trial day one, has the presumption of innocence.
Right.
But I'm not on that jury.
Right. It would be so difficult. I would have been excused immediately.
I probably
hands
would
down.
have been too. I would have been too, because as much as I'd want to sit in on that trial, the right thing for me to do would be to say, listen, I've read a lot, I've heard a lot, and I really don't think anything short of a freaking miracle. Jesus Christ himself could sit down next to me on this chair and tell me that Letecia didn't do it, and I might side-eye him. I'm not going to lie. I'm pretty sure you
Right.
don't want me. I have
Right.
to be
And
honest.
as they're bringing the jury in for all of these, for all of this questioning, they're telling them she did it, but she was crazy. So immediately, they feel like she's guilty, and that was tricky. That was tricky because as they're going through those questions, Tellini is like, so do you feel like I'm in front of I'm behind the 8 ball here, because I'm going to have to prove to you that she was crazy? And most of them answered yes. And that's the opposite of the way it's supposed to work, because according to those rules and the presumption of innocence, the defense shouldn't have to do anything at all. Of course they can if they choose to, but she's supposed to get the presumption of innocence. The burden of proof is entirely on the prosecution. They have to prove she's sane rather than the defense having to prove that she's insane, although they're going to try.
Right, which is what's odd to me is, this is where hold on, let me write. I cannot type and speak at the same time at all. I'm butchering writing the word Kickstarter, like if it's a super hard word to sound out. It barely has it's not that difficult. Well played, Jen Lou. Okay. This is what I'm having. So yes, you're right. The defense doesn't have to put on anything, but they're the ones that have said she's not guilty by reason of insanity. So that intimates right there that they're going to have to put some type of defense on, right? But part of the state's state's plan will obviously be to lay out the evidence that they have, which will include, cell phone data, forensic. Now, I'm curious how the defense is going to handle that, because not guilty by reason of insanity is not saying that the person didn't do it. They're saying that they did do it, but at the time they were insane. That's really what the argument is. That's what their defense is. It's an acknowledgement. So what I'm curious about is when they start putting on the forensics and the cell phone data and the crime scene text and the autopsy and all these things, are they just going to sit there and not say anything? Like, this makes no sense to me.
Oh, I agree. That's why I had to call some attorney friends, because I'm right there with you. Are they just not going to argue that evidence? Or are they going to argue, one of the things that Letecia wanted to argue early on was jurisdiction.
Who does she think has jurisdiction? Because Letecia, let me tell you this, Miss Ma'am, you didn't want it to be Florida.
No. Yeah. No, so Letecia arguing jurisdiction in the beginning, and she played it off, just like she said the video taken on her cell phone was accidental. She said in that first letter to the judge that she learned through her PI, and not because she's the one who killed Gannon, right? But she learned through her PI that El Paso County didn't even have jurisdiction, and that's because she wrote that letter in August of 2020, and by that time she was trying to say that Gannon was actually killed in Douglas County. And so that El Paso County would not have jurisdiction. You know, she's trying to say at that point that Gannon was killed up there in Palmer Lake, where they found the particle board with the DNA and blood evidence on it. So I asked an attorney that question. You know, what if the defense can prove that Gannon did not come home with Letecia that day, even though she was jumping up and down saying it was true in the beginning?
Right.
You know, what if the defense can prove that Gannon wasn't killed in El Paso County? And the response that I received to that was that Colorado is a statewide system, and you know, it's Colorado v. Letecia Stauch, not El Paso County.
Right. It's the whole ass state.
Right. So, you know, you can take that ace and put it right back up in your hole, Mrs. Stauch. Excuse me, Ms. She's divorced now.
Oh, geez, Lou, I can't with her. You know what? Somebody asked me today, and I thought this was a very, very interesting question. So because Gannon's little body was found in Florida, could Florida charge her with something? And I was thinking about that, and my initial answer was no. Well, I mean, I suppose if they'd wanted to, they could have, right? But they would give over those charges and let Colorado take it. Now, what would be interesting, even more interesting, is, which this would have already come out already, so this is not going to happen, but when they recovered Gannon, he had water in his lungs, meaning he was alive, however little, whatever, in that suitcase, and that he actually died as also the result of drowning. And it happened in Florida. We would be looking at a whole different trial here, because Florida would he is under 12. It would be a capital offense immediately. And I do not think they would allow her to use the not guilty by reason of insanity, because different states do it different. And I don't know how Florida does it. I think they're very similar to Texas like this. In Texas, there's like a hearing before that plea can even be made. You have to ask to make that plea, and you have to be approved to make that plea. Isn't that interesting?
Right. Well, so remember, okay, the first list of endorsed witnesses from the prosecution, it listed by name 90 federal agents by name. So they considered very closely on whether or not she was going to receive federal charges, or where those charges, you know, would come from. Now, at that point, when they found his body, she had already been charged with some of the charges that she faces today. You know, so there was already a case open out of El Paso County. But once they found his body and did the autopsy, you know, which was done in the Santa Rosa County's coroner's office in Florida, you know, they obviously, I mean, I'm assuming, but I think it's a pretty educated guess that, you know, they did not in fact find anything like water in his lungs. And so they believed that he was in fact killed in Colorado, and not having any charges in Florida at this point is a lot like not having charges in Kansas when she assaulted the deputy during extradition. Because what's the point of opening up another case in another state when she's going to face the brunt of it in Colorado? You know, what do we send her back to Kansas for court, or do we send her back to Florida for court? So they made that decision, but at the time when they made that decision, like I said, there were 90 federal agents listed by name on the first list of endorsed witnesses. So it was heavily researched and scrutinized, and the decision they made is to leave it with El Paso County.
Now I want to ask, to that point, should this trial result in the worst case scenario, which would be an acquittal, could Florida then charge her with something, and then could Kansas also choose to prosecute her for attacking the officer if this results in an acquittal?
I'm not sure, but I am going to write that down right now, because on my live stream tomorrow, I will have a former special agent of the FBI, and I will have a criminal defense attorney. And so I can ask them that question. And I never, ever guess. And I'm not an
No,
attorney, and
me
I am
either.
not a psychiatrist. And I mean, I just consult them. So let me find my pen, and I'm going to write that down. Another really good question I have for tomorrow um, came from a live stream I was in earlier today. And that question was, if they decide that Letecia is not guilty by reason of insanity on the homicide charges, but they find her guilty of the child abuse and the tampering, etc.
Right.
So she'll go to the mental institution, but then if she's released and she's been found, okay, if she's found not guilty by reason of insanity on all of the charges, she goes to the mental hospital and she can start trying to weasel her way out, right? Because
Hmm.
in effect, she's been acquitted. However, I want to know what happens if she gets found not guilty by reason of insanity on the homicide charges, but then she's found criminally negligent on the lesser charges, and for
Yes.
some reason she is released from the mental hospital. Will she then go to prison on those lesser charges? So
I'm
that's another question. Now that I said all that, what was your question again? Oh, Florida and Kansas follow-up
right. Could
charges.
they char if
Okay.
she is acquitted on any of the acquitted completely, right? Then could Florida and Kansas decide to charge her with crimes or that she allegedly committed in those states? Because I'm pretty sure it's illegal for you to throw a body in a suitcase off of a bridge in Florida.
I would hope so.
I'm pretty sure that's a no-no here. I think it's more than frowned upon. I think it's actually like a crime. So I'm
Right.
curious about that. And that is a really interesting point. If they were to, and I wonder how the jury instructions will read. I wonder
Right.
if it will be she has to be found not guilty by reason of insanity on everything or nothing. If it's an all or nothing deal, which I don't think it could be, could it? Can they
I
do
don't think
that?
so. Yeah, I don't think so. I think it's count by count, charge by charge. And I mean, any other time I've seen them read a verdict, uh, as relating to count one, and then they quote the charge,
Hmm.
um, guilty, not guilty, regarding count two, and then they read that guilty or not guilty. So I don't think so. I don't think it's going to be a blanket sort of thing. I think that there is a possibility that she could be found not guilty by reason of insanity on some and guilty on others. Which would make sense if they found her not guilty by reason of insanity on the homicide charges, which of course I hope not. But if they did, how can the insanity be used as a defense with all of the planning and activities that she did for those other charges? The tampering with physical evidence, tampering with a deceased human body. I mean, she took a lot of steps to make all of that happen. And I mean, are you saying that she was in psychosis for months at a time? Because outside looking in, the woman was acting as if she was uh, playing out like she had a business plan, and she had an entire public relations campaign, and she's giving exclusive interviews to Fox 21 and exclusive interviews to KKTV, and she's going to Crime Online with her fake polygraph.com, and I mean, it's very
Planned
planned out.
very
you know
strategic and not
right.
the the only okay, so the only true not guilty by reason of insanity plea that I've ever believed in was Andrea Yates.
I
But
agree.
with Andrea, it was very, 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 very different. First of all, she had a very long and well documented history of not only postpartum depression, but the very rare postpartum psychosis. She'd
Mm-hmm.
been hospitalized, and her husband was told, please
Mm-hmm.
do not get her pregnant again. She cannot go off of these medications and all the things, right? But more
Right.
than that, when law enforcement arrived, and I will never forget this, she sat there. She didn't try to hide what she did. She took them to where she had put the kids.
Right.
And initially, when she was tried the first time, Texas would not allow her to plead not guilty by reason of insanity. It was overturned on appeal. And do you know, to this day, Andrea Yates, when she is eligible to apply to leave, she never applies to leave, ever. She never has in all of
Wow.
these years. She says she's right where she belongs. She doesn't want to be out.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. So she was, I guess clinically insane long before any crime was ever committed. Whereas, if you would have even used the word insane around Letecia before this crime was committed, you probably would have gotten an earful.
She would have been offended, which is this is the
Absolutely.
other thing I find interesting. So, when cases like this that make headlines and have so many people following them, normally you will hear, and the only other case that this didn't happen in is Chris Watts. There were not, it was weird. There were not people coming out of the woodwork, like from high school or anything like that knew Chris Watts, that had a story to tell, which I always thought was odd, but I digress. With Letecia, nobody has really come forward and said, we do remember Letecia doing stuff. Because one of the things that Dr. Lewis said is that alters make themselves known. There are records of them. It's just that people don't know what to look for. Like, they'll be in the school records. You'll see journals with different handwriting. She gave a ton of examples. And what I find interesting is that Dr. Lewis is going to testify that this was what Letecia suffered from, but nobody came out after this and said, man, that Letecia Stauch is nuts. Let me tell you what she used to do. Everything that we heard about her behavior really came from, like, when she tried to escape, or she had that plan, and then the messages in the threats in the peanut butter and stuff like that. That's very different than,
Yeah, now I have heard from one of her pen pals that she did cite specific instances where she had worked with mental health professionals and she had been diagnosed with this or that. At this point, she has claimed bipolar, OCD, DID, oh gosh, I can't even remember I know there are two others. Schizophrenia. So she has at various points seen mental health providers, but I don't think that she's done it without a clear and true benefit of doing so. Does that make sense? Because she's done it, but much like in this case, to get out of something, to get out of trouble, to get out, you know what I mean? So I don't know. I don't know for sure, but I know that she is very good at trying to pull and twist things in her favor.
I wonder what the state will say about her mental health evaluation. I wonder what they'll diagnose her with.
Well, so I haven't seen the state. So her first sanity evaluation was done by Dr. Gray at Colorado Mental Health Institute at Pueblo. But excuse me. But they did come out in court at one point and say that report showed that Letecia Stauch is most likely feigning the symptoms of DID. So all I know for sure is that the initial sanity evaluation said she was faking. That's another curious thing to me. So normally when somebody does file not guilty by reason of insanity, the defense has the evaluation done first, gets a doctor to say that she was insane, and then they change the plea from not guilty to not guilty by reason of insanity. And then the state comes back and does a second evaluation as a rebuttal to the defense's evaluation. And in this case, they didn't do it that way. And again, Letecia's defense attorneys are not unlike Letecia herself. And they're sneaky. I believe entirely that Dorothy Lewis not turning her evaluation in until the very last moment is so that the press couldn't talk about it, is so that it couldn't be out there. They want to have as much surprise as they can. And I just, that's my opinion. It's my opinion. But it's weird that they flipped it and that their doctor was actually, the second evaluation. That's not the way it normally works. And I did confirm that with Scott Reich of Crime Talk. He's the one who told me that.
I think it's interesting too that Letecia had to be told, you need to cooperate with this doctor. Basically, she's working for you.
Right. That led me to believe that she didn't cooperate with the state's doctors.
Right. Which I find the whole thing about her is, I don't know if interesting is quite the right word, but I will say this. If nothing else, I'm glad that this trial, even if we can't have video, if all we ever get is the audio, I'm glad that it's being streamed in some form or fashion, because I believe that this is one of those that needs to be watched. I believe in that. I believe I believe in people attending trials. There's a reason why the trials are public in the United States. It's the checks and balance system. So I think this is one of those that's going to need to be supervised by the public. Faux show.
Absolutely. It is public information. So right now, with the jury selection, it's audio only, but they will begin streaming with 3 stationary cameras as soon as we start the presentation of evidence phase. And so basically what that means is there will be a WebEx available through the court's website. And in that, for the presentation of evidence, there will be 3 cameras. One camera will be stationary, pointing toward the judge. Another camera will be stationary, pointing toward the courtroom to exclude the jury.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third camera will be stationary, pointing at the witness. So it will be live streamed, and we will have access to 3 different vantage points. And then the judge did give permission to record and or restream. The only difference is, like, if you've got a law and crime camera in the courtroom, they can zoom in here, zoom in there, focus on this, focus on that. And in this case, they can't do that. It's stationary cameras, the judge, the witness, the courtroom. That's it. But that's better than Idaho. I mean, my God, what's going on with public information in Idaho baffles me.
Yeah, this is what I understand the pretrial. Okay, look, it's going to be difficult to seat a jury because it's going to be it's not that the judge or that it's expected for jurors not to have ever heard of any case ever. That would be an unreasonable expectation. They just are expected to not just forget everything they thought they knew and only concentrate on what's being said in the courtroom. And that's what they're to use to base their deliberations and eventually their verdict on. That's it. That's all that means. So I get out of an abundance of caution that the judge does not want the pretrial hearings streamed, right? That like video. Okay. I get it. Because they do release audio after the fact. So I get it. Okay, fine. But after the fact, why can't there be cameras in the courtroom when Lori Vallow goes to trial? I know that the grandparents have petitioned, and I'm hoping that the judge listens to them because they have family that can't be there and they deserve to see.
Right. I heard last night that Tammy Daybell's parents petitioned the judge and it was denied because they can't, I guess they can't leave their home or they can't travel or something like that. And I believe that petition was denied. I heard that yesterday on Crime Talk.
Oh, that they just completely flat out denied their petition for cameras during the trial. Yep. Which is what's interesting about that is Lori is the one that's anti-cameras. Chad is like, cool, I want all the cameras in here. Bring them all in. He didn't care. It was her attorneys. And see, this is my thinking. I think that Lori is anti-cameras because she does not want the public to hear what a monster she truly is, what kind of monster she truly is. I think we all kind of have an idea that Lori is a monster. But I think through the details of the trial, we're going to hear exactly what kind of monster she is. And I think that that scares Lori more than anything, because I think she enjoyed getting away with presenting herself to be something that she is not at all on the inside.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I did want to, I know that it's impossible to, for these conversations to be linear, but I did want to get back to a couple of things about
No,
Dorothy
let's
Lewis.
do it. Please, let's do it.
So clearly she's going to get on the stand and say that Letecia Stauch is neurologically impaired, right?
Right.
So Dorothy Lewis, throughout her career, has basically tried to sort of upend what she calls the myth of pure evil. So she does not believe in evil. She believes in science, and she believes that, evil is a religious concept, and in the courtroom it should be a scientific concept. That religion doesn't belong in the courtroom. So I'm sure that we're going to hear something about that. The defense trying to prove that Letecia Stauch is not in fact evil, that there's a scientific explanation for her behavior. And so one of the things that she has said throughout all of her clients is that all violent offenders share 3 traits. The number 1 trait being dysfunction, brain damage and dysfunction. The number 2 trait being that they suffered some sort of child abuse or childhood trauma. And then the 3rd being psychotic thinking, with paranoia in particular. So that's why she wanted those, the MRI and the EEG. The purpose of the MRI was to show brain damage. The purpose of the EEG was to show brain dysfunction. And I found a YouTube video. I can send you the link to it because, given what we're about to go through in this case, it was important because it showed someone sitting through one of these EEGs trying to prove that they had dissociative identity disorder. And what that EEG was looking for were when the person switches from one personality to the next, what happens to their heart rate, what happens with muscle tension, things like that. And I don't think that they were able to work out getting an MRI and EEG. So that'll be interesting.
Yeah, because wasn't one of the things that she had, that Letecia was upset about and felt that her rights were being violated, is didn't she fall from one of the bunks inside the jail, and she wanted to be checked out and they denied it or something like that? What am I?
No, you're correct. That's part of the federal lawsuit.
Okay.
Right.
She's always up to no damn asshood, and it's hard to keep up with it all.
Yeah, but that is far from the only time that she's complained about brain injuries. She's been complaining about, falling and hitting her head and blacking out. She's always complained about it. So I think that that's just one of her go-to excuses when she doesn't want to take responsibility for something, is that she's suffered, so much brain damage. But still considers herself highly intelligent. One of the things I always say about Letecia, and it just rings so true to me, is that Letecia Stauch is nowhere near as smart as she thinks she is, but she's a lot smarter than most people give her credit for.
I will agree with that 100%. I will agree with that. So you don't think that Dr. Lewis was able to give her an EEG or an MRI?
I don't think so, but I don't know that for sure.
I'm interested in that because I had a seizure disorder when I was a kid. I had my very first seizure at 10, and they determined that it was a result of like an injury hitting my head. And I remember having EEGs. I had a bunch of them, and none of them were abnormal.
Interesting.
Which you would think I would have some abnormality, right? And I had to be on Tegretol until I was 14, and then, 13. And at 13 and a half, and between 13 and 14 is when they started titrating me down, because in Texas you have to be off of Tegretol and seizure free for 2 years in order to apply for your driver's license. And that was very important to me. And I never had another seizure again until when it iced really bad and I couldn't get into the doctor to get my Xanax refilled, and I'd been like 5 days without it, and I had a seizure
Wow.
from that. But that's a different type of seizure. So
Right.
yeah, I can't. Why do you think they weren't able to maybe not get an MRI and an EEG on her? Is it because she was uncooperative, do you think? Or because
I don't think so. I think it was just, the coordination of it all, and the fact
okay.
that, the jails, the hospitals, they're as understaffed as every other organization in this country right now.
Mm-hmm.
And, Letecia Stauch is no more important than anyone else who's waiting for testing in the system. And there are a lot of ins and outs in bringing in outside equipment and outside doctors and things like that into like jails and things like that. So I
They
think
don't.
it was just logistics.
Okay, because I thought I would have thought they would have like taken her, because I do remember my mom used to work at the county hospital in Fort Worth, John Peter Smith Hospital, and every so often, I would go visit my mom and see, walk around the hospital, and that's where they brought the inmates from the jails, not from prison, just from the Tarrant County Jail is
Right.
So I was like curious, could they not just
Right.
just take her? I mean, I know not, it would be
Well,
definitely be something.
she's an incredible flight risk, though.
Yeah, she's
Remember that
messy too.
too.
She acts a
So
fool when
yeah.
she gets transferred. That's true. That's a good point.
Right.
She's always
Right.
acting. See, Letecia, you're getting your own way. I'm just so curious how all of this is going to come together and play out. Because
Right.
what trauma do you think that Letecia, because this was the other thing, all those things that you mentioned, these are the things that Dr. Lewis has found that these people have in common. But one of the things that she does in making these assessments is she was adamant that you cannot rely just on the patient.
Right.
So who in the hell would she get historical data from? I mean, I know where she would go to get it, but who would back up the historical data for her?
Right. Mostly they look at medical records.
Right.
Yeah.
Don't you think at some point some hint of something would have come out in medical records in all of these years? Like, I don't remember hearing anything about Letecia being on any type of like medication long term.
Right. Well, in fact, she said that she told this to a pen pal, but she said that she's suffered from these things for a long time, but she doesn't take medication because what she does to treat her illnesses is travel. I'm not kidding.
Travel where, Letecia? You don't go anywhere. But you're in a prison, so you're extra
No,
not
I mean
traveling.
before all this.
Right. So
That's
this
why
is
she
my
traveled so much.
Oh, okay. So
She,
this is
yeah, it was therapy to her.
therapy to her. So this is my thing then. If she has all of these issues and her therapy was traveling, and now she is essentially locked up, she cannot travel in any sense of the word other than in her imagination, how come she is not more problematic? Not problematic is not manifesting things that would be documented. You know what I'm saying?
I'm surprised that she sat through court for the last 3 days and we haven't seen a single outburst. You would think that she would try to stage that,
Yes.
because how could someone who's insane sit through the last 3 days even of jury selection without acting a fool? I don't know.
Right. And especially because this is the elimination phase, right? And you've heard so many of the jurors have an issue and think that they don't believe in not guilty by reason of insanity, and they're side-eyeing the hell out of a DID diagnosis. This would be the perfect time to put your
Worst foot forward.
correct. This would be the time for you to put your whole ass on display, Letecia. What are you doing? In fact, I've heard reports from Twitter, from the courtroom, that are the antithesis of this, that she's being
Right.
quiet, she's attentive, and she's taking notes.
Yep. So let's see. I've got some other quotes here. Another direct quote from Dr. Lewis is, "The gruesomeness of the murder is directly proportional to the craziness of the murderer." And in this case, that would make her extremely crazy.
That's an
The more
interesting.
gruesome, yeah, the more gruesome the murder, the more crazy the killer, basically. Let's see. Another one says,
Huh.
I am haunted by the prospect of condemning to death a person whose upbringing and brain function have made it hard, if not impossible, for her to control her own acts. Granted, the person may be a menace. I have no problem locking them up and throwing away the key. Until we know how to treat such individuals, the public must be protected. So, again, she's not facing the death penalty, and she believes that these people can be treated and then released.
Do you remember I wanted to know the conclusion of this, and this is where the documentary let me down. Was his name Mark? She
Hmm.
diagnosed him as having DID, and he kept attacking his lovers. He was gay, or is gay. I don't know if he's. Do you remember
Oh,
that
I
case?
think it was Max,
Max.
maybe? I
Max.
think it was
There you go.
Max. Yeah.
Max. Okay, and then he had the yeah. I he- I don't understand the supposition that the more gruesome the crime, the more insane
Right.
the person must be,
Right.
because we know that from studies that that's patently false.
Hmm.
That sometimes what appears to be gruesome is not an act of insanity, but the act of actual deliberation. The offender staged it to be gruesome and shocking intentionally,
Which
to
is
send a
exactly what I believe
message.
happened here.
Thank
I
you.
believe that's exactly what happened here.
See, I'm curious about the dynamic prior
Yeah.
to prior to Letecia and Al getting together. I'm real interested in the dynamic between Letecia and Landon, Gannon's mother. That's
Yep.
the dynamic that I'm interested in.
Yep. And it's all over the place. I mean, I can tell you it's all over the place. Her excuse for that video that she had taken about the candle, which is
Mm-hmm.
probably a lie, but after she came clean to this particular pen pal and said, the reason why I took that video is because I was working with Landon to help her get custody back of the children, because I was going to leave Albert and I wanted to help Landon get custody back. And then in one of the letters to the same pen pal, which she shared them with me. They haven't been made public. But in one of these letters, she was asking her pen pal to please get a hold of Landon on her behalf, and tell them, but especially Landon's parents, how much she loves them, and that they're on the same team. Now, this is after she said the nonsense about, I took care, because their mother didn't want to do it,
Yes.
and then she said, so she wrote this letter to this pen pal after saying all of these horrible things and absolutely, disparaging her stepchildren's mother. Then in a letter to a pen pal, she's saying how much she loves Landon and thinks Landon should have custody. And there have been various points where Letecia and Landon have gotten along. There have been various points where they were arch enemies. It apparently just depends on the day.
Yeah, but I mean, like, the way that I understood it, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that Landon and Letecia were friends, and that
Yes.
essentially Letecia was the cleanup woman and then swooped in and took Al straight away from Landon.
Right.
The dynamic that I want to know about, which will be which we could never get from Landon and Letecia because too much has happened. But I wish we could go back in time and understand the dynamic between those two women before Letecia set her mind to getting Al. That's the dynamic that I'm curious about,
Oh, I
because
gotcha.
it seems to me, and you tell me what you think, she sounds frustrated with Al. Don't get me wrong, but it actually sounds like she is angry and had the strongest negative feelings for Landon, not Al.
Right. Well, it seems to me that Letecia operates best in making herself look better only if and when she has someone to throw under the bus. Letecia always has to have a bad guy. Every time she tells a story about herself, included in that story is someone who has victimized her or someone that is worse than her in some way, that's done something worse than what she's doing. Because, on her own merits, obviously she's going to fall short. But when she starts attacking the character of others, that's, in her mind, that's what builds her up. And again, I'm not a therapist, I'm not a psychiatrist. That's just my opinion, just like you asked for, but that's what I think.
Yeah. I mean, we can listen, we're not trying to there's no diagnosis for being a bitch.
Right.
I mean, I'm sure there is.
Right.
But we're not trying to diagnose her that. These are just behavior patterns that we've noticed that we're commenting on. Because I know the state doesn't have to prove motive, but this is a whole different ballgame with the not guilty by reason of insanity. The insanity is the motive, which is weird all of it's weird. So we're allowed to talk about this. We're not diagnosing Letecia. I think it would be incredibly difficult to diagnose Letecia accurately because she's a malingerer and uncooperative. She'll only let you diagnose her if she wants to be diagnosed. And even then she's, it's hard to believe that she's answering a question honestly.
Right. Which is why I'm surprised that after, the decades-long career of Dorothy Lewis, that she somehow didn't see through what I think is blatantly obvious.
Yes.
I'm very surprised.
I am too. And that's why we never know. You never know what 12 people are going to do. Okay.
Right.
And I don't think anything was more evident of that than the Murdaugh trial. I mean,
True.
Even me, myself, there were days when I would flip back and forth on my opinions on certain stuff, right? I think that's normal. So the thing I'm curious about is, all they got to do is get to one juror. And I'm curious, what I want to know, obviously we can't know until they present it. I just don't understand. I need to hear what Dr. Lewis, how she came to her conclusions. That's what I need to hear. I need to know what she based this diagnosis on, because it just seems so wrong.
Right. Now, those evaluations by law have to be recorded, both audio and visual. So both sanity evaluations for the state and for the defense. Whether or not we'll ever see even clips of those, I don't know. It's up to the attorneys in court. But her evaluations were absolutely recorded. So, I mean, I would love to see those. I doubt it. There are HIPAA rules and everything else. Another thing I can't wait to see are the interviews and the body cam footage. And, I just can't wait to see what we can get our hands on.
Well, see, I'm curious. This is the thing about DID. It's a difficult concept for people to understand, and not only understand, but also accept. And usually, and what I noticed with Dr. Lewis is that, yes, she was very good about recording the sessions, videotaping them specifically, because people need visual evidence. And especially because some of the people that I'm not a psychiatrist, so I'm not going to argue about whether DID is real or not. But I just know that the psychiatrists that think of DID as a real diagnosis say that there are actual physical changes in the patient, that their heart rate changes, that they take on their voice is different. There's even some studies that suggest that things that people can't actually control, subconsciously things, their heartbeat, you can't really control your heartbeat, your breathing, and certain brain activity is different, right? And so I'm curious, I cannot imagine that there would be a way for her to get up there and testify that she has DID without playing some sort of video of those sessions and showing an altar.
Right, and I hope that she will. I've heard instances where they say one altar needs vision correction, and the next altar has 20/20 vision.
Mm-hmm.
You know, yeah, it really is fascinating. The unfortunate thing, I feel guilty when I say that this is fascinating, because Letecia has turned this into such a circus that Gannon oftentimes gets forgotten. And I do absolutely hate that part. And I hope that people will be very careful to make sure that Gannon is never forgotten.
You're right. You're right. And I know we've been on this show, but I will definitely have you back anytime and every time you want to, especially as we move through the trial. And I will say this, I know that when it comes, and it will, when the medical examiner has to testify, and we have to listen, that's a very difficult testimony, but I personally am going to stream it because I feel that I owe it to Gannon. He went, that's what he suffered through as an 11-year-old. He's just a kid.
Right.
He's just a little boy. And
Right.
I think that part of honoring his memory is for us to make ourselves hear it and understand what he went through. And that's the part we cannot forget. Yes, Letecia is going to show her ass. At some point, you can almost bet on it. She's going to do some kind of something. She's probably saving it up. That's why she's behaving right now. She's saving it up. And I agree with you. Let's not focus so much when the time comes for her to actually be on trial. Let's remember why we're there, and that is to get justice for Gannon.
Right.
And to keep,
Right. Yeah,
So.
and I will be in the courtroom every day, and I'll be going live every Thursday at 1:30 Mountain. So, I want to see you over on my channel too.
I will be there. I will be, and tomorrow I will be front and center with 11 billion questions. I will be, because I find the law fascinating, and I find your insight fascinating on this.
Right. Well, and not even so much mine, but I'm bringing friends who know what the hell they're talking about.
Yes, that's always fun. I love it when people bring friends that know things, especially attorneys.
Right.
Because obviously this is a complex legal battle. Like, let's understand that completely. Okay. There's some very difficult legal concepts coming up here. And I think that you getting ahead of it now is really, and explaining it to people so that they can understand when it comes up will be fantastic. That way, we're not all sitting around discussing, holy hell, what the hell did that attorney just say and do? You know what I mean? We can focus on, can you believe the evidence today that Letecia did this, that, and the third? Because really, that's where we need to be. That's what we need to remember is Gannon. Always, always Gannon.
Right.
Bless his
And we
heart.
need to be prepared for what's going to come out in the courtroom.
Yes.
That's why I've been jumping up and down about this doctor, even though she wasn't confirmed until the absolute very last moment, which I believe, again, was done on purpose.
Agreed.
But I don't want there to be any surprises in that courtroom. And at the same time, I feel more comfortable now talking about things because anybody who's going to be on the jury has already received a summons. And if they're watching true crime videos on YouTube, that's their own damn fault. But I can talk about anything I want as far as I'm concerned now, because now it's on the jurors who did receive summonses to stay off of channels like ours or the news or whatever. Right. So I'm a lot freer with things now, but it's go time.
I agree, but let me just put this caveat out there. Should one of you potential jurors be listening right now, go ahead and turn it off. All right. But subscribe and turn your notifications on. And that way, when the trial is all wrapped up and you're free to talk, call me.
Call me. Oh, thank you so much for tonight.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, I will see you tomorrow.
All right. I will be there front and center. I promise. And I'm going to share it on my community tab.
Awesome. I
you.
appreciate it so much.
Thank you for coming up here. I appreciate it. This was
Heck yeah.
fascinating, and I can't wait to talk more.
Okay. Bye for now.
All right, bye. All right, you guys. So that was fantastic. Fantastic. Okay, now I need another favor from you guys. Give me un momentito, por favor. All right. I'm going to end this really shortly. Oh, crap. I forgot how to type. Hold on. And if you wouldn't mind, if you just cannot get enough of Jen Lou and Truth Teller, we're back again. Come on over and hold on a second. Let me put this in the chat for you. Oh, geez, Lou. I don't even know how to work this dadgum phone. What am I doing? Here we go. Come on over because this is where we're live at 9:00. Okay. So I got 10 minutes to get a drink, have a smoke, and I'll see y'all over there. All right. I put the link in the chat. I'm going to pin it. Let me pin this right quick. There you go. It's pinned at the top. That's where we're going. We're going to be talking about a missing 411 case. This is one of those ones that's just like, oh my gosh, it's crazy. And it's one of those cases. It's a whole rabbit hole, you guys, and it leaves you with more questions than answers. Yeah, that's how it goes. All right. So good night. I will see you guys over at Truth Tellers. All right. Thank you guys for being here. If you haven't done so, give your girl a thumbs up. Keeps me in the algorithm, keeps your notifications coming, and it brings new people. We love new people over at the ward. All right, you guys. Good night. I'll see you over there. Bye.